Did you just buy a tree, took it home, and started looking like this? Maybe you just planted it in the ground and started wilting on you within seconds to a few minutes. You watered it, you fertilized it, you gave it asomite, you gave it fish emulsion on the hour, and your tree, it's not getting any better. Is your tree sick? Is it fungus? Is it a virus? Well, check this out. Today I'm going to be answering those questions and a lot more. So let's go ahead and get started. What's up, guys? This is Alan, and in today's episode I'm going to be explaining to you damage to the root system, either physical or chemical damage, or what some people call it, transplant shock. I have another video where I talk specifically about gardening myths and transplant shocks, so if you want to watch it, link in the description. In today's episode, we are talking specifically about damage to the root system, either physical or chemical damage, which is going to cause your trees to actually wilt within a few minutes to a few hours, depending on the type of root damage your tree has sustained. So let's go ahead and get started with physical damage to the root system. So I just brought in some trees from my other property, and beautiful, amazing looking Pakistan mulberries. And if you guys been following me for a while, you know these trees grow like a weed, especially if they root themselves in the ground. The problem that I have with Pakistan mulberry trees is if you don't move them for a while and they have water and they have the right conditions to grow, they will grow like a weed, and there's really not much you can do about it. And if you don't move them, they will root themselves through the container. They will grow roots through the bottom of the container into the ground, just like this one right here. You can see it was rooted in the ground. So I have probably about close to 100 of them, and they were like 8-9 feet tall if you look at the screen right now, but I still have a lot of them left, and I need them on my other property. So I had to cut the root system of all these plants. There's no way around it, and that's the only way to actually move them. That is physical damage to the root system, because I would say within 1 minute the trees started wilting. Every single one that was rooted in the ground started wilting, and no amount of water, no amount of fertilizer is going to make these trees not wilt. Why is your tree wilting? Well, the reason your tree is wilting is because the root system supporting that canopy is no longer there. So as soon as you remove that energy source from your tree, what your tree will do in order to preserve energy and not die is it will stop sending water to its canopy to preserve water inside its trunk so it doesn't die and its root system. Now, depending on the severity of the damage to the root system, your tree is either going to make it or not make it. Every plant's a little different, but for Pakistan mulberries and mulberries in general, to me, that is not an issue. And this comes from experience. If you don't have an experience with your tree, before you chop the roots, you need to do some research and ask online. So as you can see, all the Pakistan mulberry trees that I have in here sustained physical damage to the roots. And like I said, they're not gonna die, they just lost their canopy. This canopy right here, since it's growing season, the night temperatures are warming up, it's gonna take about a month for them to grow new leaves. Maybe the smallest branches on the top, like the ones that have green growth on them, they will probably die back a little bit. But other than that, this is okay. I've done it before, and this is the only reason I'm able to tell you this. But like I said, if you have no experience with your plant, well, hopefully you didn't damage the roots that much and they will recover. The only plants you're gonna have to worry about are usually those plants that are root sensitive. What are our root sensitive plants? Well, here at the nursery, we really don't have that many root sensitive plants. And by that, I mean when you actually disturb the root system even a little bit, they will wilt on you and even die. Most of these plants that have sensitive roots are gonna have fibrous roots, like this guava plant right here. But even though guava plants are not root sensitive, let me show you what to look for, so that way you are careful when dealing with a root sensitive plant. Right here, there's one. There we go. This is a fibrous root right there. You can barely see it, and most of the root ball is gonna look like this. If you have no experience and your plant has a root system like this, you gotta be careful because these roots are easily damaged, and when pulling them out of the container, that could be enough to damage the root system, and guess what? Physical damage to the root system, and if your plant is super sensitive, it will die. The only plants that I have here at the nursery that are that sensitive, where I really have to be careful, are usually papaya plants, and there's another one over here that is not commonly known, and that is a false jaboticaba, or a blue jaboticaba, or vexeter, which is this guy right here. And then I got another one on the other side. These trees actually are still in the container, but in the container they rooted themselves into the ground. And how do I know that? Because when I move the container, well, I cannot even get in there. I cannot move that container anymore. It's fixed into the ground, and I know that's rooted in the ground. And I don't want to break the roots because I've killed 3 plants like this just by moving them and unloading them from a truck. Like, I pull the containers and then they're super heavy, and I had another guy helping me, so we dropped the containers onto the ground, and that moved the canopy a little bit because they're top heavy, because they're huge plants, and that was enough to kill these plants. I've also killed easily about 53 gallons just potting them and just doing regular root maintenance that I do with all my plants here, and they have no issues. And finally I figured out that this plant is extremely root sensitive. But like I said, most of the plants that we have here are not this bad, and that's the only reason why these 2 trees are still here, because I don't want to move them, because if I do, they're probably going to die. And these trees are over 10 years old, and if you can find them, these are going to be the most expensive fruit trees you will ever find at any nursery. So, and I killed 3 of them to learn that lesson, just to teach it to you guys. So if you just got a tree from the nursery and you notice them pulling the trees off the ground with some force because the trees are rooted in the ground, well, you can probably expect your plant to wilt a little bit. So when going to a nursery, just check the plants. You know, what you do is you go to the container and then you just move it around. If it moves freely, then you know it's not rooted into the ground. And if it is rooted in the ground, ask the person selling you the plant if the plant is sensitive. Hopefully they know at least if the plant is sensitive or not. And if it's not, you tell them as soon as they cut those roots, it's going to wilt within seconds to a few minutes. And that is how you know if you have damage to physical damage to the root system of a plant. They wilt within seconds to a few minutes, that quickly. Another way people damage their roots is when you go to a nursery. This thing I hate the most when people do this. I usually call them out every single time. They grab the plant by the trunk and then they pick it up. If the plant is fully rooted in the container and this potting mix is dry like this one, that is not going to be a big deal, like this yerba mate right here. But if that soil is wet and that plant has a fibrous root system like this guava right here, well, the wet soil is a lot heavier than dry soil, and by you picking this up, you can see how the root ball is giving a little bit. And if you pick it up even more just from the trunk, you are going to rip the roots in there, and that is going to cause physical damage to the root system. So when picking containers up, if you're not familiar with that plant specifically, you need to pick it up like this. Do not ever pick it up from the trunk, especially if it's not your plant or if you don't know anything about that plant. So let's go ahead and talk about chemical damage to the root system. Well, the end result is the same. Your tree is going to wilt, and the likelihood of your tree dying is going to be a lot higher. So the longer your plant is exposed to those chemicals, well, the more of that chemical will get inside your plant. And this is the reason why when plants wilt because of chemical damage to the root system of your plant, most of them will not make it. Now, what can you spray on your plant that's going to make it wilt? Well, herbicides for one. If you live close by to somebody else and there's a fence and your plant is close by, and they spray their plants or they spray their grass for weeds, and it's windy that day, even if your plant is just down the road, you know, ways down, that stuff's gonna be in the air, and that will get to your plant, and it's going to kill your plant. So how can you usually tell the difference between physical damage to the root system and chemical damage? Well, the main difference is chemical damage takes a lot longer for your plant to react to. Usually when your plant is exposed to chemicals, it takes several hours to even a few days for your plant to start wilting. But when it starts wilting, your plant will wilt like severely, like the entire canopy will just completely get decimated, and your branches are going to start dying back as well. That's a tell sign that it's a chemical damage to the root system. It doesn't necessarily have to be chemicals. It could be fertilizers. Maybe you are into the fish emulsion thing, and then you just dump a few gallons in there because the more you feed your plants, the faster they're gonna grow, right? Well, maybe that fish emulsion had something in it that your plant didn't like, and you put too much of it in the ground. Well, your plant's gonna react to it. Chemical damage to the root system. Fertilizers will also do this, but fertilizers usually your plants are gonna burn. The outer edges of your leaves are gonna turn brown, and then after that they're gonna wilt a little bit. If it's only mild damage, if it's severe damage, then obviously that's gonna cause severe wilt. But yeah, so those are two of the main differences between physical damage and chemical damage. So what can you actually do to help your plant come back? Well, you can do the same thing you do to your kids or your pets when they're sick. You gotta take care of them, right? If this plant is meant to take full sun, well, guess what? Your plant's sick right now. So the best thing you can do right now is shade it. Now, if it's physical damage to the root system of your plant or even chemical damage, what you need to do is you need to treat your plant like a bird root, meaning that the root system of your plant is no longer able to support that canopy anymore. So you need to prune it back immediately. That will actually conserve energy, and your plant will not have to support that huge canopy that it once did, because it can no longer do that because of the damage that the root system of your plant sustained. So pruning back, how much? I don't know, guys, just eyeball it. 25, 50%. If you're really worried about your plant, 50%. If you're a little worried about your plant, then you can just prune it back 25%. And what you can do is you can top it off, or if you have a lot of branches on the sides, you can just cut the branches off and then, you know, get about 25% off. The next thing you need to do is you need to water your plant when dry. If it's physical damage to the root system, just water when dry. You don't have to soak the ground. You don't have to build the berm, and no amount of B1 and azomite and all that dumb stuff that people tell you to use is going to make your plant come back faster. You know, the only thing that you actually can do for your plant that will give you better results than anything else that you can put in the soil, that is have patience, which most people don't. Have patience. It's going to take a long time for your plant to recover. Depending on how fast your plant grows, it will take easily 6 months to over a year for that plant to root itself in the ground before you see any growth on top. During that time, just water when your plant is dry, and make sure you shade it, even if your plant is meant to take full sun. So really disappointing you guys by telling you there's nothing that you can buy to make your plants come back faster. That is just reality. And I learned this from experience by damaging a lot of plants over the years, and finally I understand them. And the best thing you can do for your plants is just be patient. It's going to take a long time, and during that time your plant, it's not going to grow. And to check the progress on your plant to see if it's coming back or not, what you can do is you can scratch the bark. So most times your plant is going to lose its entire canopy. So what you can do is you can just scratch the bark. Scratch. And if it's green under, like this one here, you can see it is green. This is alive. So that means this plant right here, it's alive. Now this plant sustained frost damage last winter, so that's why the canopy took damage. But the root system of this plant is fine, so it just needs time to grow a new canopy. That's a completely different topic. But anyways, guys, hopefully this helped you out. If you have a plant that just wilted on you and you didn't know why, well, that is one of the main reasons why. Damage to the root system, physical or chemical. Obviously, not watering your plant is gonna give you the same results, but for those questions, I have another video on transplant shock in the link below, so you can go ahead and watch it. As always, if you guys like the video, don't forget to like it so it gets recommended to other people and more people can actually discover what true gardening is about. And as always, guys, comment below if you have any questions, and I will see you next time.